Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are prepared to exercise your minds with this week's episode of Strata-Gym. I'm your host, Andrew Freeman, and I've got some strategy experts with me breaking down your favorite 40k and AOS armies so you can go out and destroy and conquer friends or foes. On a legal note, none of the things said in this show represent Games Workshop or any of its affiliated companies. This show is in no way affiliated or owned by Games Workshop. This show is created by two guys in a small broom closet that enjoy nerding out to OP formations that put so much cheese on the board it makes grown men cry. Let's do it! Today I have with me Jason Kluver. Tell the listeners how you got into the hobby and why you picked the current army you're playing.
I got into the hobby about 20-odd years ago. The reason I got into the hobby is because I was a starving college student that was looking for something to do besides drinking and convorting with women. So my cousin and me and my best friend decided to go in on a starter set, and, well, fast forward 20 plus years, here I am. I play just about every army except for the current Kings of the Ring, Tyranids, and Orcs. Yeah, that's about a little info on myself.
Have you tried the Primaris yet?
I have done the Primaris Space Marines. As a diehard Space Wolves fan, I kind of find it a little wishy-washy. Why would all of a sudden Logan allow Robbie G to put these super Marines into his already kick-ass Marine chapter, but...
So, we got a request from a fan. I guess I'd call him a fan, even though we've only done 2 shows. They requested that we, instead of going over Space Wolves like I was planning, he requested we did a deep analysis of swarms versus elites, army-wise, for 8th edition, because 8th edition has changed everything. Everything has been changed. What used to be strong is now weak, and what used to be weak is now powerhouse. So, we're going to change up this episode a little bit. We're not going to do core builds. We're not going to get ripped. We're going to do a deep analysis of 8th edition Swarm versus Elite armies. So let's get into it.
We're going to cut out their living guts and use them to grease the treads of our tanks. We're going to murder those lousy Hun bastards by the bushel.
Alrighty, so your typical swarm armies in 8th edition, they would happen to be Orcs, Tyranids, and Imperial Guard. You know, the game is based on a D6, and there are only so many numbers you can roll on a D6, which is 6. If you throw enough dice, you're going to get your 6s and your 5s, and that right there is key. Whether you have rerolls or rerolls, you're still going to get your 6s when you throw 140 dice versus 20 dice with rerolls. That's why, in my mind, these horde armies are going to absolutely roll over everybody else on the table.
And what about 8th edition has changed that? What is all of a sudden horde armies just knocking people out, knocking teeth in?
A lot of it has to do with a finite amount of shots. Horde armies used to have to fear blast markers, large blast markers, templates, stuff like that. Those have been taken out of the rules. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Now it's D6 hits or 2D6 hits for those old template weapons or those old blast marker weapons. When you have a veritable like that you can't reroll unless, well, I suppose you could spend a command point to reroll it, but then again you still have to take that dice because you have a finite number of rerolls, again with command points. It just allows the horde armies to absorb those wounds, save those wounds, or take those wounds and not care and still keep coming at you?
A huge thing. I started playing orcs as soon as I read the faction focus. One thing I noticed is orcs leadership is now how many people are in their unit. And that was one reason I grabbed orcs. Another reason I grabbed orcs was because vehicles now can get wounded by shootas. When you used to play, you used to ignore vehicles with certain weapons because they wouldn't even be able to penetrate.
Right.
Now, everything. The first shot I did on a vehicle with a group of boys, a shooter wounded a Razorback. And I was like, woo! Yeah! It's all different, baby! And then I ran up with my boys and just beat the Razorback to death with my choppas.
Yeah, back to your thing about your boys and vehicles. With everything moving to a toughness-based system in the new 8th edition, armor value is gone, and so you don't have to build an army that has this ability to take on an armor vehicle or even a super heavy vehicle. It comes down to like a tactical squad of Marines. You used to have to I might need to go ahead and deal with a tank, or I might have to deal with a super heavy. So I better have a plasma, or I better have a melta. And you don't need to do that anymore in this edition because it's toughness. It's toughness 8 for most of those super heavies, and toughness 7, I think, for most vehicles.
Yeah.
So anything can wound it, practically, from the base troopers. I mean, like I said, you throw enough dice at something, it's going to die, irregardless of how many saves that person makes or whatever, because just the sheer amount of damage that can be dealt now through Horde armies.
Now, as a Space Wolf player, you know all about the melee. Would you want to go toe-to-toe with any of the Swarm armies melee with your Space Wolves?
I used to have the misguided perception that Wolven were still the end-all, be-all answer. But I understand now that even if I get my attacks back on that unit, I'm still going to be taking damage, and I'm still going to lose those models even after they get their attacks. Yeah, the 5-up ignores damage roll is nice, but if I have to make that 25 times for 5 models, I can tell you it's not going to work for me. I'm not going to make that.
Now, which Swarm army are you most threatened by?
I think that is still going to have to be orcs. I understand that Tyranids are pretty tough, especially in melee, but orcs kind of hit both ends of the spectrum. They have decent shooting or good shooting with their blitzes and ludas, and their sheer number of models they can put in one unit, and then a mob rule where they get to use the leadership of other units within 6 inches of them.
Yeah.
It's a full unit of 30 for somebody that's taking like 10, 15 wounds. They don't care. They're still going to hang around, and they're still going to kick your face in.
That's true. And if you have 2 units of 30 for boys, you're pretty much set getting across the table, especially if you put them in a truck.
Yeah. Now, let's not even begin to think about their vehicles.
What are the cons to Swarm armies? What weakness can you find?
Beyond the sheer model count of what you need to be able to purchase?
Correct.
With these Swarm armies, these models aren't tough on an individual model basis. So I believe that with the correct army across the table from them, an army that can put out considerable amounts of shots, especially ones that, let's say, they got rerolls on the hits and damage, might be able to put a big enough dent in that green tide to stop them from coming across the table. Plus, I think that Horde armies need to realize that when you play a game, there are other rules involved, which are the scenario rules and the battlefield rules. It's great if you're going at just who can kill the most models or who can kill each other faster, but if your opponent is being strategic or tactical and taking these objectives and being able to hold you off for turns, whether it's to run away from you or whatever, then you're going to end up losing because you're not trying to play strategic or tactical. You're just trying to play smash mouth Warhammer.
All right, let's flip the script. Pros about elites. Elites can still smash face. Elites still have advantage because most Space Marines have a 3 up for weapon skill and a 3 up for ballistic skill. So I would say as long as they can keep the distance away and trim the fat before it reaches them, they can still win the day. Now, strategically, what would you put on the board that would destroy any swarm army?
Well, I don't know if it would destroy any swarm army, but something that I've been toying with recently is the addition of a Lord of War in Robbie G. I really like his ability for the Ultramarines. He allows them to reroll misses and hits, not just ones, but any misses and any wounds. Plus, you get to use his leadership when he rolls, and he gives you 3 bonus command points, which is huge because, again, those come into rerolls, whether it be reroll for your leadership or whatever. 2 other models that I really like that synergize well together would be the Primaris Ancient or Company Ancient, the one with the banner. So the banner allows you to roll a d6 when a model expires. When the model dies, you roll a d6. On a 4, 5, or 6, that model gets to do its shooting one last time. So go ahead and pick the biggest weapon on that model and unload with it. Let's say it's a Grav Centurion. That's rapid fire 6 on the chest. Why not shoot those hurricane bolters? That's 12 extra shots that you wouldn't have got before because it died. Then let's say that you were to have an apothecary close by. After the model dies, the apothecary can go to that unit and restore X amount of wounds, which I think is D3 wounds, or bring a model back if there's no damage to any models in that unit. So that Grav Centurion that got the extra shots from the Company Ancient or Primaris Ancient is back up and shooting in the next shooting phase because of the apothecary coming over and using the Narcithium to resurrect him.
Do you have an Eldar build that could do the same thing?
I have not had the luxury to build with my Eldar. I think with Eldar, it's all about Psychers and mortal wounds. Because unlike most other wounds is, if you roll a d6 wound on a gun or something like that, the wounds don't roll over to the unit.
Correct.
Mortal wounds, they do roll over.
That sucks.
That does suck. So, let's say you have your bunch of warlocks, and they're using smite. That's D3 mortal wounds. And let's say they get lucky and they roll a 10 or 11. That's D6 mortal wounds. Those are wounds that you can't save, and when they kill a model, they roll over and they keep going until the models are all dead with no saves.
Will that still cut through a 5-up invuln?
Yeah, because you don't get your invuln.
So there's no way to save against the mortal wounds?
Well, if they have some type of feel no pain, for lack of a better word for it, where they ignore a wound, they can use that.
I don't know of orcs having that.
No, I know Tyranids do.
Tyranids do, but orcs do not. So there's your weakness right there for the orc group.
Is mortal wounds.
Yeah.
But then again, mortal wounds don't come very cheap. It's Psychers and Robbie G. If you roll 6 on to hit, and then the Intercessors, I believe.